Greetings in the name of Jesus Christ, our Father and Lord. This is Tsegaab Addis from Great Commission, Ethiopia, from Addis Ababa. So my title is Contextualized Muslim Evangelism in Ethiopia, the case of the Great Commission ministry in Ethiopia. The introduction: after Christianity, Islam is the largest religion in Ethiopia. Even though the country claims as a Christian nation, it's a historic fact that the country has been a place where both Christianity and Islam claims as their hub. It's believed that Ethiopia was the first African country that hosted Muslim refugees during the formation of Islam as a religion in the Middle East. So the Christian kings of Ethiopia provide a safe haven for the newly emerging Islamic religion at that time. According to the Central Statistics Agency in Ethiopia, Orthodox constitutes for 43.5%, Protestants constitute for 18.6%, and Roman Catholics 0.7%. Islam is about 34%, and traditional religions are 2.6%, that's in 2007. So the majority of Muslims inhabit in the eastern, central, and southwestern part of the country, and the Oromo, the Afar, and the Harari, Somali, and some other ethnic groups are mostly predominantly Muslims. So historically, both Christian and Muslims lived in a relatively peaceful way. But nowadays, it's not uncommon to observe tension in terms of religious hegemony in the Christian. In the face of the effort to convert more followers to both Christianity and Islam, especially the evangelical Christianity, continues to be growing faster. In every part of the country, the desire to understand the difference between Christianity and Islam is also growing from day to day. So the desire to understand the similarities and differences that exist between the two religions groups is associated with widespread misconceptions and assumptions held by both followers. So the misunderstandings are associated with the lack of appropriate efforts to fill the gap-induced persecution and religious atrocities in some parts of the country. So despite the fast growing in number, many indigenous inhabitants remain unreached or least reached with the gospel in places where evangelical Christianity have existed for more than a century now. This may be due to a lack of contextualizing the gospel to indigenous people who are first-generation Muslims and claim to be born in a Muslim family. Therefore, the need for intentional contextualization is not an option. Instead, it is a necessary step to effectively engage the Muslim worldview with the gospel of Jesus Christ. So I am motivated by the fact that there are efforts in designing contextually a relevant message and approach used by the churches and Christian ministries in Ethiopia. However, my intention is to explore the presence of adequate and intentional contextualization in the presentation of the gospel and discipleship training and church leadership development in ways that address the Muslims in country and in particularly where Great Commission ministry operates. So my major focus is reviewing the 4 spiritual laws booklet, which is prepared by the Great Commission or Campus Crusade for Christ ministry. So review of the 4 spiritual laws. This paper tries to examine the significance of using major approaches such as the 4 spiritual laws, a brochure with a basic gospel message prepared by Dr. Bill Bright, and it's a general tool to share the gospel news in evangelism to all people, including Muslims, with the gospel of Jesus Christ. So it's a historic fact that the 4 spiritual laws is a booklet prepared by Dr. Bill Bright, the founder and president of Campus Crusade for Christ. His close friend, Pastor Rick Warren, witnessed that Bill Bright's little booklet, the 4 spiritual laws, is most widely distributed religious pamphlet in history. It has been printed at least in 200 languages and read by an estimate of 2.5 billion people. The 4 spiritual books, the laws booklet, is basically based on a Christian biblical worldview, and it starts with God's love for all humanity. In this booklet, the existence of God, of the Bible, not other name for the Creator, is used. It seems that the claims of a Christian worldview, which is highly relational and emotional, as well as following a definite principle described as the spiritual laws. So as a result, Bright recommends a unique means of salvation by accepting Christ, who addresses the failure to broken relationship between God and man. So the 4 spiritual laws booklet capitalizes on the fact that the universality of sin, its consequences. It addresses sin as an individual's failure to abide by the laws of God, as well as the remedy is individual repentance and decision to follow Christ. The discussions and recommendations in the booklet are based on the general assumption that every human being has a spiritual hunger and search for love and realignment with God. It may not address the approach of Islam that claims Allah as a creator and an independent ruler, and not like God of the Bible, who is described in the New Testament and revealed through the person and work of Christ, that eternal Son of God the Father. So my study traces the existence between contextually sensitive approaches employed by the Great Commission ministry in Ethiopia in the effort of Muslim evangelism, while developing and sharing the use of 4 spiritual laws booklet as a tool. So the people who are interviewed in this study have direct involvement in the work of evangelism among Muslims and campus ministries. Given the lack of the documentation of this specific research, I tried to generate a first-hand data collection to learn the existing realities, success and challenge, and fears, of course, during using the material in some parts of the country. So the rationale for my study is the ministries such as Great Commission Ministry in Ethiopia and faith-based organizations are enthusiastically start evangelistic works in Muslim communities with a passion to see the people get saved, but sometimes without a critical assessment of the existing context. The success or failure of a given model or approach depends on the usage of appropriate approaches and philosophies that address the barriers that hinder the advancement of the gospel. Therefore, it's important to address the key cultural values, social structures of the society before doing any evangelistic programs. One can argue that the main factor to undertake the Great Commission would be more easily facilitated by using informal contextual messaging and ministerial approaches. Conversely, as a result of lack of appropriate contextualization of the message, the trend of facing unnecessary persecution persists and costs labor, time, resources, even the lives of believers. So this research helps churches, Christian organizations, and mission organizations and ministries such as Great Commission Ministry to contextualize, to evaluate their existing ministry efforts and learn from their strengths and weakness. So this research finding can be utilized for arriving at the conclusion that and recommendations for new or different possible ways of contextualizing the gospel and encouraging the scale-up of best practices. So this research problem is basically about intentional contextualization that benefits both believers and non-believers. Although it's not only reason, lack of intentional contextualizing message of the gospel has a huge role in perpetuating the prevalence of persecution and the majority of unreached people in the Great Commission operation area. So the assumption of undermining the importance of contextually sound approaches for the gospel must be revisited. So this research tries to identify the gaps, barriers that hinder dissemination of the gospel message, where unveiling the opportunities that must be examined in a contextual approach. So my scope is very limited as a limitations. So I'm focusing only on some parts of the country workers, and then my observation is only the case of the Great Commission Ministry, Ethiopia. So it cannot be generalized to all evangelical groups in Ethiopia. So still there is a need for identifying each case by case. Let me go to the brief history of the Great Commission Ministry. The Great Commission Ministry Ethiopia started in its ministry in 1980s, adopting a local name for the Campus Crusade for Christ underground ministry, working under the umbrella of a local church because of the restriction of communist government in the country. The main focus of the ministry in those years was training church leaders. Unlike many Campus Crusade ministries, Great Commission Ministry was introduced as a church ministry. The main focus of the Great Commission Ministry in Ethiopia in those years in the past was training church leaders. Unlike many Campus Crusade ministries, Great Commission Ministry in Ethiopia was introduced as a church ministry and then expanded to colleges and campuses. In 1992, the ministry registered as an independent para-church organization in Ethiopia. During its underground years, the ministry grew slowly, but made deeper impact in the lives of many church leaders. Many senior church leaders in Ethiopia today give witness to how the trainings of Great Commission Ministry impacted their lives during the underground church of years of the church. According to the Girma Gavramadin, which is the current National Director of the Campus Crusade or the Great Commission Ministry, the new leadership change by then was had the credibility and visibility of the ministry increased so much, and especially the campus named the campaign named Zemecha Philippos, which means Operation Philip. That was the initiative of the Great Commission Ministry in Ethiopia to saturate the capital city of Addis Ababa in 52 days in the summer of 1998. Through the Operation Philip, Great Commission Ministry Ethiopia was able to train and equip leaders, mobilize colleges and high school students, train and equip thousands of professionals and executives, mobilize professional artists, train thousands of lay Christians, and introduce new and creative evangelistic strategies. Many people became interested to join the ministry as a full-time and part-time workers. This ministry's growth rate was tripled both in terms of manpower and resources. In spite of the huge milestone, he adds that he recommended in his article that in relation to this, as 35% of the country population is Muslim, materials and strategies geared towards reaching the segment of population needs to be developed. He also recommends that, in addition, some of the existing materials need to be more contextualized to make them appeal to the majority Coptic Orthodox population in Ethiopia. I think the use of the same strategy to reach the Coptic Orthodox followers and the Muslim and other religious groups and lack of contextually sensitive materials is the biggest weakness of Great Commission ministry, hindering its effectiveness. So this is taken from the article. So currently, Great Commission ministry in Ethiopia works in 7 regional offices in the country and works closely with Evangelical Church Fellowship at all levels. Even though the ministry admits that there should be a contextually sound messaging and approach for Muslim evangelism, there seems to be a significant practical, no significant practical efforts. This discrepancy is clearly indicated in the experience of frontline workers as discussed below. So the experience of frontline workers in the Great Commission ministry in Ethiopia. In the effort of identifying a first-hand information, I have interviewed 5 key frontline gospel workers currently serving in the Great Commission ministry Ethiopia. All the interviews have been engaged in direct Muslim evangelism using the approaches available since the day they joined the ministry. Each one of the interviews agree that there should be special consideration in using the 4 spiritual laws in conversation with the Muslims. One of the interviews came from Muslim background, suggests that the evangelism using the 4 spiritual laws should be seen just as an introduction to start a conversation. Because the first law discussed that the love of God and his plan to everyone, stating that Jesus as the only begotten Son of God annoys the Muslims. She also states that I am trained how to quote Quranic verses that indicates Isa is the word of Allah and discussed with them in their worldview. As an organization, we need to develop material that helps Muslims understand the gospel. The second respondent is from Addis, and he says, I have been working in Great Commission ministry since 1996 with different responsibilities, such as the Jesus Film Ministry Coordinator, Great Commission Ministry, Harar Regional Office Coordinator, and the National Church Planting Movement Director, as well as the Church Leaders and Pastors Training Program Coordinator. He worked for more than 25 years among mostly Muslim-dominant areas describes the approach. He describes the approaches that were utilized, including mainly Jesus-filled Muslim evangelism approach, tract distribution, God's story, and one-to-one evangelism. He agrees that there has been no significant effort made by Great Commission Ministry Ethiopia to contextualize the 4 spiritual laws to address the Muslim beliefs. He adds, Muslims come to know Christ and new churches have been planted among Muslim communities. Majority of Muslims are refusing the gospel when we use mass evangelism approach. When we meet them individually, they are open and positive to listen, to discuss on the faith-related issues. However, he does not indicate the challenges associated with the use of 4 spiritual laws booklet and response from the Muslims. The third interviewee introduced his role. Currently is coordinating Harar Great Commission Ministry Regional Office. God given me the opportunity to serve in Great Commission Ministry for the past 23 years. He indicates that in the Great Commission Ministry, we do not have a separate material for Muslim evangelism. However, in our region, we are working to provide various trainings to Muslims evangelism. Our region is inviting the ministers that working in Muslim evangelism and facilitates them for different training. Our role is follow-up of those who took the Muslim evangelism and coaching and mentoring trainings. We also provide discipleship and leadership training to become true leaders, disciples of the Lord. There are special considerations and adjustments they practice while they use 4 spiritual laws in Muslim evangelism. He says, if we use the 4 spiritual laws to reach Muslims, we have to change different words. For example, we need to change the word God to Allah. Instead of saying the word of God, we need to use the word of true Allah. When we apply the 4 spiritual laws, our starting point for reaching Muslims is to be more effective. If we start the history of Genesis and bring them into the love of God before we speak God's love. So that's his recommendation. Another respondent says that we also prioritize reaching at a consensus to use Bible as reference, as it's indicated in the Quran as the people of the book, Holy Bible. All of the frontline workers, practitioners agree that sharing the need of the Great Commission Ministry must prioritize reaching the Muslims with the gospel of Christ rather than the Orthodox. So he says, because reaching the Orthodox with the gospel is not as difficult as Muslims. Most of us in the evangelical community came from Orthodox church background. However, the number of followers of Islam in the Ethiopian evangelical church is very few. To reach Muslims communities, Great Commission Ministry will organize its own required contextual tools and target the Muslims with the necessary material. In order to reach Ethiopian Muslims with the gospel, we must first recruit people who come to Jesus from Muslim community and share with them a vision and send them to the lost community. In addition, it's important to reach out to these communities using a contextual gospel material and recruit and train people with special calling for Muslim communities. One of the respondents report that the Great Commission Ministry did not bear much fruit in the areas where it reached to Muslim communities. Because of the lack of contextual evangelism, it has not been effective. In the Great Commission Ministry, there is no missionary that have a special burden to the Muslim community and no missionary assigned and called to bring the salvation of the gospel into the community. In addition, the desired result were not to achieve because we did not train and send Christians who came from Muslim community. The fourth and the other respondent says that he mentions his role as a team leader of a student-led movement department on the basic campus crusade and national student-led ministry in South and Central regions. He has been coordinator in the action groups to mobilize and equip students for evangelism and discipleship since 2014. He says, regarding the approach, we choose to contact the people and understand them. Especially we read Quran, prepare materials and train from their book. We equip students to be cautious in considering their way of speech, culture, and the styles they wear clothes. Some literatures we were using when I was on campus include the outreach tracts prepared by Somali language to reach the people in a relative way. Training materials prepared referring from the Amharic Quran version. So the contextualization efforts so far. The respondents agree that there is no significant effort made to contextualize the four spiritual laws by the Great Commission Ministry Ethiopia. They claim that instead of humbly and politely communicating the gospel, the Christian gospel with love to the communities of Muslims around us, we have seen unreasonable persecution of Muslims, all the saints around us because of our wrong way of communication. When we preach the gospel to Muslims, instead of preaching Christ alone, we compare their faith with ours and say that our faith is better than theirs. This opinion is bringing persecution to the Christian church. The other frontline workers suggested that the response varies from time to time and from place to place. And it seems that responses are not directly associated with the approach or material used. He says, as we know that Muslim communities are somewhat hard to understand the gospel, so that the response is negative. When I was in campus, there were challenges even to freely move and speak because of their religious dominance and aggressive quarrel with other religions, including ours. I remember the time that we were stopped praying because of their interference. I am sure the trend is the same still now, to bring gospel to the community, but God is sovereign and using opportunities to save communities. Further suggestions to the Muslim evangelism approaches by Great Commission. To preach the gospel to Muslims, we must first pray earnestly to God that He will give us a special love and pardon. We also need an independent Muslim evangelism department of the Great Commission Ministry Ethiopia. It is also necessary to provide Muslim evangelism training in a contextual training environment. Recruit for Great Commission Ministry full-time staff. We must deploy and train the born-again Christians from Muslim background. We have to train and prepare the verses from Quran and address their questions. We must use contextual means while speaking with Muslims. For example, respecting Muhammad. We must show love to Muslims, prepare tracts based on the Quran and Hadith, and train Christians on reading and presenting Islamic faith during the gospel conversation. Finally, identifying the special burden ministry and providing adequate education and training will enable the organization to be effective in the work of God's kingdom. Otherwise, we will always be giving the same evangelistic method to whole community and look for different results. If we do not prepare a contextual evangelistic ministry in our organization, it will cost us more, make us accountable to the mistakes conducted. Another interviewee stresses that if our Great Commission Ministry, Ethiopia's material, that is the 4 spiritual laws tract and follow-up materials are prepared in a relevant and contextualized ways, it will be good to reach many Muslim population. If Great Commission Ministry, Ethiopia have documented materials and aggressively offer training to Christian population in this regard, every Christian will get awareness and will have a desire to share gospel for Muslims. If Great Commission Ministry, Ethiopia recruits Muslim Christians to assume full-time missionaries, it will be easy to address their message. So the conclusion is, as a pioneer in the ministry of the nation, the Great Commission Ministry, Ethiopia evangelizes people from all religious background, including Muslims. Although there are a number of reasons for the success, which is not solely associated with the message, its efforts made to reach people with gospel has produced encouraging results. However, the organization did not take contextualizing the gospel message in light of Islamic worldview. So the suggested action items by the frontline gospel workers in the organization indicates that there is a need for more work on contextualization. So the recommendations include the organization should look into evaluating the 4 spiritual laws material in light of the context of Muslims and develop a more contextually sound tools. And the second, contextualization should be conducted using the available materials and consult the frontline workers and ministry feedbacks from the field. And the third, it's worth that evangelistic materials developed or adopted, includes Quranic verses that are making the link between Islam and Christian worldviews. I think you have got the main idea of my presentation. Thank you so much.